Welcome, everybody, to this special Zoom event in Berry College's Creative Writing Reading Series, a poetry reading by Charles Harper Webb. Following the reading, we'll have Q&A, so please feel free to post your questions, and you do that in the Q&A section instead of in the chat. For those Berry College students here, for cultural events credit, we'll post a link during the Q&A at the end of the event, which will take you to a short survey to complete within 24 hours. In lieu of the live book sale that we would typically be doing following the reading, we have signed books on sale at the Shipyard Bookstore. Tonight's reading is sponsored by the Georgia Poetry Circuit, a consortium of Georgia colleges and universities, which is housed at Berry College. Charles Harper Webb was born in Philadelphia, but grew up in the suburbs of Houston. Product of a musical family, he sang in choir at church and school and took up the guitar at 10. He joined his first rock band at 15, playing in popular bands in Houston and the Pacific Northwest, where he attended graduate school at the University of Washington after graduating from Rice University. At Rice, he found his vocation as a writer, changing his major from physics to English. While studying creative writing at the University of Washington, Webb became an avid fly fisherman and student of martial arts, making his living as a rock singer-guitarist and publishing poems and stories prolifically in literary magazines. He moved to Los Angeles with plans to continue his musical career, but wound up teaching freshman writing at USC while earning an MFA in professional writing and a PhD in counseling psychology. He built a practice as a marriage, family, child psychotherapist in Beverly Hills, then phased it out when he was hired as a tenure-track professor of English at California State University, Long Beach, where he currently teaches creative writing. Webb has published 12 full-length collections of poetry, including his latest, Side Bend World. His poems and short fictions have appeared in distinguished journals and anthologies, including American Poetry Review, Paris Review, Iowa Review, Harvard Review, and Best American Poetry. The editor of Stand Up Poetry, an expanded anthology, he's also published a book of essays, A Million MFAs Are Not Enough, and has a novel, a literary thriller, forthcoming, entitled Ursula Lake. Webb's many awards in poetry include the Morse Prize, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, the Felix Pollock Prize, a Whiting Writers Award, and a fellowship from the Guggenheim Foundation. Webb's weapon of choice, as one reviewer phrased it, is humor. His work has been described as accessible, wildly inventive, quirky, and manic. What Webb is sure of, he himself has said, is that art shouldn't be boring. In my poetry, he says, I try to grab the attention of my audience and hold on. And so we get poems with titles such as Getting to Know My Neurotransmitters, 13th Floor Elevators, and Face-Eating Rottweiler, Free to Good Home. These are all poems from his most recent collection, Side Bend. It's our shared world we find here, but seen a tilt from a view entirely Webb's own. What he wanted to do with these poems, he has said, is show how even everyday things can become strange and interesting when you look at them from unusual angles. And they do. A school of tiny fish, a bait ball, becomes a fish tornado, a silver ghost, a twirling top, evolved to befuddle and scare the tuna, dolphin, whales that want to gulp it down, which leads the poet to reflect on how people are a bait ball to disease, how awful to be a statistic, to know your life depends on luck. While not shrinking from such terrors, from the everyday anxieties of being alive in this world, these richly associative poems somehow remain remarkably upbeat. His poem, Gratitude for Dark Energy, for instance, ends with praise for the dark energy that commands the cosmos expand endlessly and leaves us hope for things we'll never understand. Hope and poetry, these are things we can be grateful for. And I'm grateful to have this opportunity now to welcome to this virtual space, Charles Harper Webb.
Oh, well, thank you, Sandy. I better be good after that. No, I really appreciate that nice introduction. Well, since you mentioned that I come at things from a kind of slant, or I try to, I think I will start with the title poem of my book, Sidebend World, because it really is a little kind of microcosm of how I try to approach the world when I'm writing poetry, which is looking at it a little bit askance from maybe a perspective that even I hadn't thought of before. So to follow the poem, you just need to realize that I'm actually talking about a real side bend, where one of these kind where you bend over like so. And when you do, if you do that, and you can certainly do it at home or in your chair, you'll notice that the world shifts. And we're intelligent enough to know that it's we who shifted, not the world. But you know, some people might think, well, no, it's the world that shifted. I stayed the same. And this poem kind of deals with that idea. Sidebend World. When I lean to my right, left arm stretched over my head to help relax back muscles knotted up from hefting heavy luggage yesterday, the purple dawn-brushed ocean tilts to my right too. All scorpion fish and whales and giant squid tilt right, having to swim now on an angle to parallel the surface of the sea that swells and settles on an angle that increases the farther to my right I go. All cars in the condo parking lot incline. The maps, rental contracts, half-eaten burgers boxed and forgotten in vacationers' trunks shift, slide, fall to the right side. All waves tilt as they roar toward shore like humpbacked monsters hissing angry spume that leans, as does the lava Kilauea extruded last night, and every tree and shrub now dressing up in day-glow green. Doves in flight, cuck, like scouts that shout a warning, palm to slanted palm. Bird-brained egotists, they think the cosmos orbits around them. Speaking of which, the sky tilts, and the clouds tinted orange and pink, and the air which gleams pale blue. The faded sliver of a moon tilts, insisting, I'm still here, and way up high, the planets spinning through space feel themselves, if they can feel, shifting right until I straighten and the universe does too. All right, so when you hear my poems, you might be thinking, sorry, what is the odd little slant that he puts on things? Because that's one of my methods as a writer. I look for things that are quirky and unusual, and then I try to explore them. I think I'm going to read one in the earlier class today. Somebody asked me why my poems are full of turtles, and I told him truthfully that they're full of turtles because I like turtles, and I think that it's good for writers to write about stuff they like and that they're enthusiastic about. So this is a poem. It's kind of like inspired by Frankenstein, I guess. It's about building a turtle, and maybe it's also about building a poem. And the sticker always comes at the end. The hardest part is making it live, whether you're building a turtle or whether you're building a poem. A lot of poems are stillborn, and how do you get that life into it? So in a way, you might think this is what I'm talking about, but think about the turtle too. I'm trying to build one, building a turtle. The fiberglass that veterinarians use to patch real turtles hit by cars, dropped off cliffs, or cracked by hammer-swinging boys molds into a strong shell. With enough skill, you can carve a shell from wood or sculpt one out of stone. Paper mache will spare the turtle heavy lifting, but dissolves in rain. Paint the shell as you see fit. Incise it with stars, diamonds, jailhouse tattoos. It's your turtle. Use braided wire, jointed dowels, or rubber for the legs and tail. Glued on sunflower seeds make first-rate scales, or try sequins for a country western feel. Gooseneck lamp metal works for turtles too. The tube holds batteries to light the eyes, brown for female, orange for male. The head can be wood, metal, or plastic, as long as the beak takes an edge and the jaw moves. Screw or super glue the head into the neck. A pink eraser slice makes a fine tongue. Fill the shell with something light, crumpled newsprint, spun fiberglass, held in by soft leather or plastic that mimics wrinkled skin. Instilling life is trickier. Turtles struck by lightning may go Frankenstein. Jesus succeeded by commanding crawl. Try it yourself, you never know. Your best bet is submerge your turtle in water spiked with the chemicals that sloshed in ancient seas. Cover with a dome that lets in sun, cosmic rays, and the infrequent meteor. Wait in a comfortable spot. That last line is important because it's going to be a long wait. But maybe it will come to life. Maybe your turtle will live. Maybe your poem will live. And we all want that to happen. Okay, yeah, in the earlier class today, several people talked about this next poem that I'm, Snapshots of Alpaca, it's called. So I think I'm just going to read that one. This is a poem that is supposed to be simultaneously funny and sad. Some people wondered about that, but because that's how they were feeling, and that is in fact what's supposed to happen here. So it's really about what the title says. The alpaca has had snapshots taken of him in various settings in the course of his life as he tries to find a way to fit into the world. Snapshots of Alpaca. Alpaca in a black beret reading Camus, existentialist among the praying sheep. Alpaca at the Preakness dons an oat bag to fit in. Alpaca bought mistakenly by a blind man. Alpaca tramples his chew toys. Alpaca at the Valentine's dance, scarfing paper hearts. Alpaca at the crime scene, telling how he found the stiff. Alpaca's mugshot, counting ears, he's 4'3". Alpaca with Sharky, the bail bondsman, fleece meets teeth. Alpaca exonerated, Yama in custody. Alpaca joins the Navy but washes out of SEAL school. Alpaca marries dromedary. Their union, a spitting contest from the start, lasts 19 days. Fat Alpaca, scorned by other sumo wrestlers for his bad Japanese. Alpaca in college, crooning the Whiffenpoof song. Alpaca, first in his class at Harvard Law. Alpaca wins huge judgment against Microsoft. Philanthropic Alpaca signs a check to build Alpaca Stadium. Alpaca waves from the window of the 18th century chateau he imported brick by brick from Paris, Texas. Alpaca remarries. Sabrina Maidenform, heir to lingerie billions, is the unblushing bride. Alpaca catches on security camera Sabrina's romp with the Vicuña boys. Alpaca on a post-divorce singles cruise, petted by the other tourists at Machu Picchu. Alpaca held by customs, forced to show 3 separate IDs. Alpaca shorn rather than pay duty on his hair. Alpaca, after 6 months of light interrogation at Gitmo, stumbles home. Alpaca, ungulate party nominee for president, loses big on the platform, a nice sweater in every pot. Alpaca, on opening day of hunting season, hopes to be mistaken for a deer. All right. let me see. What shall we do? Okay. I'm going to read this poem that that Sandy alluded to about the bait ball. Bait balls occur when little bait fish, not that they think of themselves as bait fish, but we think of them that way. Things like anchovies, menhaden, things like that, they, in order to defend themselves against the predators that go through them and kill them in vast numbers, they congregate together in a huge ball. Well, the idea that there's, I mean, not that they're thinking, but that there's safety, and not safety in numbers, but safety for the whole population, because the predator can't get them all. And these bait balls, sometimes they actually are a ball, but other times they form these beautiful shapes of little silver fish. It's quite miraculous to see. So, you know, I haven't seen it in person, but I've seen it on nature shows, and I just was struck by it. So this poem, Bait Ball, is actually written in such a way that it looks kind of like a bait ball. I don't know if you could see it. Yeah, maybe you can. You see, that's what it looks like. Looks like a beehive now when I look at it. But anyway, this is Bait Ball. Not really round, not suitable for bouncing, not the name of any dance or game. A bait ball forms when little fish, a school, a horde, a mob, a myriad of smelt, shad, herring, mackerel, anchovies gather in one swirly swarm of shimmering. A fish tornado, a silver ghost evolved to befuddle and scare the tuna, dolphin, whales that want to gulp it down. London to the Luftwaffe was a bait ball. People are a bait ball to disease. Take him, not me. An army is a bait ball that bites back. Marlin smashed through a bait ball the way cannon shots smashed through soldiers at Bull Run. Ranks closing, the ball reforming, moving on. Awful to be a statistic, 1 in 10, to know your life depends on luck. Yet break away from the bait ball and you're the straggler, ready to be culled. Your scant power and size stand hugely on display. To have a chance, you must give up your spiked hair and bite me shirt. You must give up your solitude, surrender to the silver ink blot, twirling top, globe glittering in the sun's beams, nettle flower, cactus barrel, whirling fur hat, spool of light, flying saucer turning inside out and outside in, wraith struggling to form a face, dream creature risen from the deep that cannot see its beauty move like God beneath the water's skin. So I hope you get to see one of them. It's pretty impressive. Let's see. How am I doing here for time? Oh, here's a poem that's just, this is a cruel poem, actually. Australia apparently is a country that has got all kinds of really venomous things in it. They've got like the most poisonous octopus. We thought octopuses were poisonous, but apparently they have a little one that can kill you with a sting, and the most poisonous snake, and they've got all kinds of poisonous stuff. And they've also got poisonous trees. And I do like to write about strange things. I like to write about things that just seem unusual and weird. And when I read about this tree that they call the stinging tree, I was just really kind of amazed by it and horrified by it. But given that my my mode of operation often moves through humor, I also thought of a kind of wry humor if somebody tried to use the stinging tree leaves in ways that leaves are sometimes used. So this poem is called Stinging Tree, and its scientific name, when you hear it, this is what it is. It's Dendrocnidae excelsa. Dendrocnide excelsa. So, stinging tree. This is no place to hang your hammock, build a tree house, or spread a picnic blanket for your love. In the land of the most poisonous cephalopod, blue-ringed octopus, reptile, fierce snake, and spider, Sydney funnel web, beware of Dendrocnide excelsa. You've ridden miles and want a bit of shade, a bite of this burgundy fruit. Silicon hairs cover the tree. The slightest touch, even through clothes, implants the hairs, so small the skin slams shut behind them as they squirt a toxin, which a scientist named Ulrichs, German for imbecile, shot into his own arm and screamed for 3 days straight. Honeymooner 1. Too bad they don't have fig leaves here. Honeymooner 2. Hey, this might work. Stinging tree hairs spring out into the breeze, triggering agonizing sneezes and nosebleeds. Somehow the toxin doesn't damage human cells. Still, the pain drove tough Marines to shoot themselves in World War II. Even century-old hairs preserve their sting. You're hiking in the outback. When your bowels sing, it's time, no problem. You can use these leaves. I can't hear you, but hopefully a few of you at least are groaning at the thought. I certainly do every time I read the poem. Let's see. Another one. How am I doing for time? Okay, I'm doing fine. I may read you a couple of things that aren't from this book too. I'll tell you. Here's one about another strange thing that happened, and I exaggerated it. But in Las Vegas, some engineers tried to build a wave. They tried to build a giant pool and a wave making machine that would allow people to surf on the pool. They may have perfected it by this time. I don't know. I don't hang out in Vegas, but the first time they did it, it was a catastrophe, and the wave overflowed everything and flooded everything. So that gave me the idea for this poem, which is simply called Wave. The champion surfers flown in from Oahu cheer as the wave sweeps across a lake-sized pool toward the perfect beach barged in from the Riviera, where thonged showgirls char in the Nevada sun. But the wave doesn't fold into soft fingers of foam. It swamps the girls, then humps toward the hotel. Tossing palms like swizzle sticks, it swallows saronged bellmen along with the guests who've coughed up $500 a night to stay in Mandalay Bay, USA. The wave lifts the geologists and physicists who engineered it, lifts mob bosses overseeing their investment, lifts and crushing them into the highball of itself, pulls free from its concrete ditch and lumbers on. Shops full of shot glasses and bisque hula dancers, bare breasts or hibiscus bras, koa trees spangled with Hawaiian honey creepers, 10th century hiaus where howlies were eaten raw, the booth selling show tickets, rows and rows of slot machines, their players too engrossed to know what hit, all feed the wave as it licks up the Luxor, Caesars, the Venetian, New York, the Bellagio, the MGM Grand, then sloshes off to meet its mama in LA. That poem's definitely written by somebody who lives in LA, i.e. me. So let me see. Oh, here's another one that we talked about a little bit in the class this morning. I didn't read it. Another bizarre thing that I read about was this monster, this African monster, who was I don't know a lot about him other than that he was half a man. He's not like he's like cut in half. down the, this way, not across the middle, but down right, straight down the middle. So he'd have one leg and blah, blah, blah. And he's called the Iuru. And it was so bizarre that I thought I would write something about this. And because this creature, monster, whatever, was cut down the middle, I made the poem. Again, I'll show it to you if you can see it. Yeah, I don't know. There, maybe you can see that. Anyway, it's cut down the middle, the poem is, but I don't read it that way. This is called, well, the title is the first line. So, you don't want to meet the Iuru trekking the Kalahari or the Sunset Strip. He'll stalk and eat you, darting shadow to shadow with his body cut in half, one eye, one arm, one leg, one testicle. Whether his penis is halved lengthwise like a hot dog, no one knows, or how he moves so fast by hopping. He may try to quell your fears, saying he's only old Kitkoshe, Zulu, or Adroa, Zaire. He may say, I'm G.I. Joseph, wounded in Iraq, or not mention his missing half at all. In this country, you're forbidden to by law. If he applies, you have to let him join your juggling troupe or swim butterfly on your relay team. If you're a woman and he asks, you have to walk down the aisle, letting him press so close that tux and trousseau fuse, your left side melding with his right until you seem truly one flesh, though he will rise next day from the marriage bed, a half man still, no trace left anywhere of you. So I imagined what a scary monster like that would be, and that's what I came up with. Here, I'm gonna read you. The last few weeks I've been working on prose poems, and prose poems kind of sound like regular poems, but they're written in a prose style. They don't use poetic line breaks, and they do often tell little stories. I can sometimes people call them flash fictions, but if they're highly imaginative and use a lot of metaphor and use poetic devices, I tend to call them prose poems, and I'm a big fan of them. So I'm going to read you one. This is the title is a quote from John Keats, the great English lyric poet, and it's called "Half in Love with Easeful Death." And I'm taking it seriously. So there is a woman in this story, and death is in the story too, although he doesn't name himself that. Half in love with easeful death. He had sexy hair, black as Tiffany's cat sin for singularity, accentuated by tomato lips and cream cheese skin. He looks like Dracula, her best friend Pammy said. His name's Kevin, Tiffy explained. I wouldn't cut my finger near him, Pammy said, or let him give you a hickey. Going on dates in his hearse creeped Tiffy out, but her mom loved the white lilies he brought to every meal. She collected his thank you notes in Gothic script. The man has manners, she said, and a distinguished hand. He does, Tiff said, then blushed so hard that she felt slapped. After Le Petit Mort, she would lie in his arms and sleep like the whatever. In all her 19 years, she'd never felt so free. Still, she panicked at, will you marry me? Is it my job, he said. The sighs of pain, you don't have to tell me. Try getting on an elevator or catching a cab. Airports are hell, and the hours, worse than OBGYNs. I'm looking into other work, the military maybe, or the FDA. Lawyers make good money, she said. Kevin Grimm Esquire does have a nice ring, he said, and slipped a big one on her wilting hand. So when you date death, it may not always turn out very well. Here's one that I read a couple of times recently because it was Halloween, and this is another poem that's just based on a kind of crazy idea about costumes. Hold on, I'm gonna have a little drink here. Strictly coffee. I don't do the Charles Bukowski thing and get drunk at my readings. This is called Halloween. Denise says, "Don't tell me you're going in that." Harold drops the black cape he has just draped around his shoulders. Plastic fangs fall to the floor as he says, "Why not? I was a hit last year." Denise shapes a dab of sour cream on her forehead. "That was last year. The thing to be this year is food." "If you like being a Monterey tostada, fine," Harold says. "I like being Dracula." "It's so regressive," Denise says. "Helen's going as a ham and cheese on rye. Jack's going as a Jello salad. Barbara's going as knockwurst. Wei Ming's going as either almond chicken or mushu pork. Whatever happened to monsters and ballerinas?" It has to do with demolishing Eurocentric assumptions or post-colonialism or something. It's all over the news. I hate the news. It's depressing. See? Neglect your social responsibility and the world leaves you behind. She points to a giant hot dog bun. "Slip into this. You're Polish. Be a kielbasa." "I'm just a fourth Polish. I hate kielbasa." "Well, squeeze some lemon on your head and go as a broiled trout." "I'm allergic to fish." "Okay, put these on and be a baked potato. You love those." Grumbling, Harold steps between the huge, greasy potato skins Denise drags from the closet. They close around him like a damn Venus flytrap. "It'll take the jaws of life to extract me," he says, but follows Denise out under the silver platter moon into the crisp as a green salad autumn air. Okay, so as you see, they're little stories, but they use metaphor quite a bit, and I hope that they are imaginative. And so I think of them as poems more than as stories. Okay, I'm going to do, I think, well, at least two more. Maybe two would be good. It's supposed to be like 35 minutes, right? I seem to remember that. I don't know why it's not 30, but anyway, hope I didn't remember wrong. Here is another poem that's based on a quirky thing that I saw. Those of you who were in the class this morning, you've heard this one already, but maybe you'll get more out of it this time. There used to be a magazine called Weekly World News that was placed in the same basic area as the National Enquirer and other magazines right by where you'd pass them on your way checking out with groceries. And this one was full of the strangest stories, all of them made up, I'm sure, about weird things that happened, or supposedly happened. They didn't really happen. And they had recurring characters. One of them was called Batman. And it wasn't like the Gotham City Batman. It was a boy that was half, actually, I think it was Bat Boy, but he was half bat and half boy, and he'd been found hanging upside down in a cave in Transylvania, and there were all kinds of stories about him. But another one of the characters that was really popular and had a lot of stories was the world's fattest man. And the world's fattest man was over 3,000 pounds, and that's fatter than a human could possibly be. But they would have pictures of this world's fattest man on the cover. And one day I walked by and there was the world's fattest man on the cover of Weekly World News with the headline, "World's Fattest Man is Missing." And I took that headline as my title, and I just wrote to see where it would come out. And it came out someplace that surprised me. World's fattest man is missing. When I weighed 200 pounds, no one could miss me. Sunny Day Play School trucked in a special desk and let me use the teacher's pot. "Did you see that?" people would say. At 400, I started fading. When the boys chose sides, they didn't look at me. When I asked Tina to the prom, she turned as if I weren't there. At half a ton, I couldn't squeeze out of my house to be seen. I dodged mirrors like a vampire so they stopped reflecting me. Now people stare at my photo, bloated toad with tiny tadpole feet, my pea head grinning like the world's biggest 3,010-pound joke. In person, I'm like the Earth's curvature, my scale too vast to see. People mistake me for some water-sculpted mountain. Parts keep avalanching down. Once the flesh quits quivering, I'm very still. Matter ceases to exist when movement stops. That is my goal as I sit, absorbing stillness, or is it absorbing me? Houseflies doze on my forehead. Spiders nest in every crack. Soon my weight will make me fall into myself. My gravity so strong, not even light escapes. So the world's fattest man turns into a black hole in the end. And I never imagined that it would go there. I had no idea where the poem would go. I prefer to start my poems not knowing where they're going to go. I like to start them with an idea that I think is interesting. World's fattest man is missing. What does that mean? How does that play out? And I just let my unconscious mind associate and follow it and see where it goes. And if it goes someplace I like, then I have a poem that I like. And sometimes it does. Other times it doesn't go much of anywhere. And then I just say, okay, that one didn't make it. And I move on to the next poem. All right, I think I'm going to finish off now. And I'm going to finish with another poem that has to do with science. You may have noticed there's a lot of science in my poems. And this one came about because I was reading about neurotransmitters and the way that they really rule who we are. I mean, our personality is our brain, really, and neurotransmitters are really important in how that brain functions. And you know, an imbalance of neurotransmitters can cause very, very serious problems. But so I was reading about that and I thought, well, that's interesting. And look at all the things these neurotransmitters do. And then it struck me that some of them had funny names, names that I liked. And they reminded me of people in some way or another. I suppose the first one, serotonin, it reminded me of a name, Sarah Tonin. And I thought, I'm going to imagine what these neurotransmitters look like, as well as what they do, and see where that one comes out. So this poem ended up being called Getting to Know My Neurotransmitters. Serotonin, with her blue bonnet and gingham dress that rustles on her way to church, gentle nurse who salves the bites and abrasions of the day, calms me when my feet twirl like propellers and convinces me to slide the butcher knife back in its block. Endorphin, with her corkscrewy red hair, her southern comfort voice that gets me goose loose, lifty drifty, creamy dreamy, stone silly as a martyr by marshmallows I catch and eat with the whipped cream that clouds plip plop onto my tongue. Dopamine, smarter than he looks with his buck teeth and straw hat, nutty norepinephrine on his arm. 5 minutes with them, and I'm fortune's son. My muscles twitch, thoughts siren through my brain's clogged streets. Fun? Yes, it is, but stay too long, and weathermen start spreading rumors that I'm Mary Magdalene. Kill the bitch dogs bark as I drive by. High time then for acetylcholine, lithe in her sports bra, wing-footed triathlete who relays orders from my brain, then lights my muscles' fuses so that I can dance or scratch my ear or run, so that when my eyes find you in bed, my hands and lips and other parts can do to perfection every little thing your brain wants done. So it turned into a kind of love poem or erotic poem or whatever. Had no idea it was going to go there, but I ended up liking it. Okay, well, I think I'll stop there, and I'd be happy to take questions. How do you want to do this? Do you want to moderate, Sandy, or should you want me to?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll read them for you, and
Okay.
you can respond. That's good.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Wow, look, 212 people. Boy.
Yeah. So Asa, who is in class today, asks, as a Houston resident, did Townes Van Zandt ever inspire your music or poems?
He is not someone who has, though I like him. But yeah, that's not one. I haven't lived in Houston in a long time, by the way. I left Houston to go to graduate school right after I graduated Rice. So that was a long time ago. But he certainly is somebody that could inspire my poems, but he hasn't. Sorry. Maybe I'll have to look at some of his lyrics. Maybe he will inspire me. But yeah, I don't even know if he was there when I was there.
Another question is, what inspired your alpaca poem?
The alpaca poem was inspired, I think, I mentioned earlier, a friend of mine, a really good poet named Richard Garcia, wrote a lot of poems in which, or at least wrote some poems in which he had animal characters that were named what they were, like dog or possum or something like that. And I think I got that idea that I wanted to, I like alpacas. I think it's a funny name. I think they're funny animals. They spit on people, supposedly. They never spit on me, but I hear they do. And I just got this idea that this alpaca was going through the world trying to live and constantly being misunderstood, and that there would be these snapshots of different important parts of his life. And I just thought, okay, that's a goofy enough idea to appeal to me. Let's see what happens if I try to think of what the snapshots of alpaca would be. And as I did that, I uncovered this fact that poor alpaca really was having a tough time of it. People always misunderstood him. So it ended up being kind of sad. Well, it ended up being, I think, very sad at the end, because he ends up wanting to be mistaken for a deer so that somebody will shoot him. That's fairly serious. But yeah, it started with just a goofy idea, and I do like to track those down and see what happens when I do that, and see if, as when I'm on, what happens is that the unconscious comes in and adds a lot of depth to the poem that I didn't start off with. I have to discover it. I mean, I use as an example sometimes, like for me, it's like an archaeologist who's walking along, looking down at the ground, and he sees a little bone, and he doesn't know what it is. It might be nothing. It might be just a one little scrap, and that's it. But there might be like a Tyrannosaurus or something under there. You never know. So the poet's job is to excavate that and see what's under there. And that, at least that's one of the many metaphors I use for writing, just trying to explore it.
The next question is, do you have any favorite writers and poets that inspire you?
Oh yeah, I have too many to list. As a matter of fact, in the class this morning, we talked about some of them. Thomas Lux, who used to teach at Georgia Tech, was a good friend, and one of them. Richard Garcia, that I mentioned. I mentioned Sharon Olds, and then Sandy and I were talking about David Kirby and Barbara Hamby, his wife. Those are excellent poets that I've gotten a lot out of. Dorian Lux is a favorite of mine. Denise Duhamel is another, but there's a lot of them, just a lot. I mean, my friend Ron Kirchie, who is probably better known as a young adult author, is a terrific poet. His last name is Koertge, if you've ever seen it, because some people have seen his name but don't know how to say it. But that's just a few.
How long does it take for you to write these poems? Is it an instantaneous stream of inspiration or a decently paced workshop process?
Oh, I wish it were. A quick stream of inspiration. It varies widely. Is the answer. I tend to do rough drafts quickly because I try to really sink into a kind of waking dream state and jot down whatever comes to me. And that I'll generally do in one sitting. And that can come pretty fast. But then I have to decide what the unconscious has given me, because the unconscious does not, it's not an art, it's not, it doesn't care about technique, it doesn't care about order, it just cares about spilling stuff out. So then I have to kind of decide what it is that I've got there. An analogy that I use sometimes is Freud's free association. Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, he would tell patients, you've probably seen cartoons of this, he would have patients lie down on a couch and he would sit behind them with a notebook, and he would tell them, say whatever comes to your mind with no censoring, no, just pour it out. And he would take notes and jot down what he thought were the important themes they were talking about. And to me, after I have spewed my rough draft, I have to become the psychoanalyst who looks at it and says, what's the good stuff? What is this really about? And that can take a long time. I tend to work in groups because I don't like to get bogged down on one poem. And I may have a group of 10 poems and I'll move from poem to poem. And my goal is simply to make each one better, not to finish it, just to make it better. And if I do that, I'm on the right track. And by the time I finish with the group of 10, you know, several of them will have dropped out. They just didn't cut it. They just didn't come together. Maybe because they weren't very good to start with, or maybe because I just wasn't up to the task of finishing them. But some will make it through that process. And that I actually set up so that they go through like 5 notebooks, five folders, and there's a month between folders. So I just go through this process. So, you know, the quickest I would get a poem out would be, say, 5 months from inception. But usually they might be longer. I put rough drafts in a notebook and pull them out kind of at random, because I'm always trying to trick the unconscious into giving me something better, something good. And it's not always easy to access the unconscious. I've gotten pretty good at it, but still, we spend most of our life with our conscious mind that Freud called the ego. That's ruling our life. Like I had to use my conscious mind to make sure that I got here on time, because 3 hours difference, and I had to keep saying, oh, okay, 7:30 means 4:30. And if, you know, my unconscious wouldn't have cared, it wouldn't have showed up at all. Who knows where it would have been? I might have been out, you know, driving around or something. But that conscious mind keeps me on task, but it doesn't give me good poems. That's the problem. It's good for editing, but it's not good for generating material. Now that's my metaphor for it. Many other people have other metaphors for it. So long answer, but that really is the process I go through.
That's great. And actually, this afternoon in the class, I had wanted to ask you about the relationship that you saw between being a psychotherapist and a poet, and that was a great response to that. Thank you. The next question: would you consider your last poem, the one that you read last, one that speaks on mental health?
Well, yeah, I guess so, because those neurotransmitters, if they're out of whack, can lead to anxiety disorders, can lead to schizophrenia, can lead to depression. All kinds of things go wrong when the neurotransmitters are off, and a lot of the medications that are aimed at those disorders try to adjust some of those, like SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like Prozac and those kind of things. They work directly on serotonin. So yeah, I wasn't really thinking of mental health when I wrote the poem. I was thinking about what the characters would be like, and some of the things that those neurotransmitters did. And I tried to work those in there. But yeah, it's based fundamentally. I probably was reading about neurotransmitters because I was reading about yeah, what they did and how they could go wrong and cause people problems.
Did you ever play any sports?
Yeah, baseball. I mean, of team sports, I loved baseball. I was a fanatical baseball player until I had a back injury when I was 14, and that caused me to stop playing, and I never got back to it. I mean, you know, if anybody's played baseball, you know that in order to play baseball well, you have to have this kind of fearlessness of the ball. You can't be afraid of the ball if you're going to be a good baseball player, because that's just getting hit as part of it. And what I discovered after I was out for a year, well, first of all, people were getting a lot bigger and they were throwing a lot harder, but I didn't have the same, the same hunger in the belly to stand up there and have people throw at my head. And I was a shortstop, so I also didn't really feel like having huge guys hit really hard, crazy bouncers to me. So yeah, I just realized, okay, maybe baseball, maybe that year made me a coward for the baseball. But it was also a time when I was really getting into guitar, so I kind of switched from that. And then now, as far as other sports go, I was a real fan of scuba, and for a while I wasn't great at it by any means, but I loved scuba. And I've been when I was in Houston, I used to hunt a lot, and I hunting and fishing, and I did that, and I still fish a lot when I can. Until the pandemic came, I was doing a lot of fishing. So those are sports too. But baseball is a sport I love. I mean, I followed the World Series, and I watched the Braves beat the Astros. And my sister's still in Houston, and she was really hoping for the Astros, but the Braves had the better team. I think they deserve to win. So,
well, this next question sort of connects to that, and you kind of responded to part of this. But so the question is, as a Houston resident, are you a fan of Travis Scott and his concerts?
yeah, it's been so long since I've been in Houston that I actually didn't know who Travis Scott was. I know now. But yeah, I looked him up. But no, I was not a fan at all because I'd never heard of him. And I don't really follow rap that much. I mean, I'm older now. I guess maybe I'm out of it, but I'm still a rock and roll guy at heart. But no, I didn't know about I didn't know about him, and it certainly was a horrible thing. I saw it in the news, and I thought, oh wow. But that was bad. It reminds me, sounds like something that would have happened in India or something. People are always getting crushed. But I honestly didn't think it happened here. So live and learn. Anyway, bad thing. But no, I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a non-fan. I was an ignoramus.
What's your favorite genre to write in?
The one that's the most fun is poetry. No question about it. Poetry is like running a sprint in a way, even though I told you how I have this long process, but the initial working with the poem is it's surprising, it's interesting, it's amazing, if it works right. So poetry is great, but I also write fiction, as Sandy mentioned, and I really like writing fiction, but it's more like a marathon, and it can be grueling. On the other hand, it allows you to really build a whole world and to really explore a character in depth. And the psychologist in me really enjoys that. So I like short fiction too. It's like a novel, only in shorter bits. It's sort of halfway between a poem, I guess, and a novel. But I like essay writing too. I really enjoy writing, just pretty much period. As long as it's creative writing. I don't really enjoy academic writing particularly. But but poetry is the most fun, no question. And poetry is where if you're really in love with words and I think that I qualify for that. Poetry's the place to be.
Another question, your last poem included references to dopamine and serotonin. Do you struggle with a depressive disorder? And if so, how does it show up in your poetry?
Honestly, I'm blessed that I don't. Um, I certainly know people who do suffer from that. Being any kind of artist certainly means you're not immune to feeling sad, bummed out, depressed, whatever you want to call it. But clinical depression is another animal. I've come to understand. It's it's a lot more. It's a lot worse than being bummed out because your girlfriend dumped you or something like that. I mean, it's a whole different ball game. So no, thank goodness I have not. But I've seen plenty of it, and yeah, and I think certainly I wrote a poem. I don't have it with me, but I wrote a poem about myself called "Excitable Boy" because I am kind of high strung and excitable, and so I can get upset about stuff. I can get anxious about stuff. I mean, I'm certainly not this Zen master who sits back and is all calm and everything. I don't think you could think I'm that from reading my poems, but I'm definitely on the excitable side. But no, no, I don't have a diagnosable anxiety disorder, and I don't have a diagnosable depressive disorder, and I thank my lucky stars that I don't.
All right, we have about 3 or 4 more questions here.
Okay.
So Grace asks, did your childhood and where and how you grew up influence your piece Down the Bayou?
Yeah, and sure it did. I mean, speaking first of all, it started. I mean, New Orleans and Louisiana is really close to Houston. And when I first started going on the road with my band in high school, we played in Louisiana quite a bit. So I know that scene a little bit, and I certainly growing up in Texas, I heard an awful lot of country music, and I'm a fan of country music, especially the older stuff. And so I heard Hank Williams when I was a little boy. I've heard Hank Williams ever since I can remember. So the poem began with that, just thinking, whatever I hear, then I want to be it. If I hear Hank Williams, I want to be a Cajun. If I hear the Beatles, I want to be a Liverpudlian. If whatever. If I read, I think I've got that interview with a vampire in there, and if I read that, I want to be a vampire. It's just that to me is the magic of reading. I said in the other class, I don't think one life is enough. And if you read and if you listen to art and music and everything, you get transported. You can inhabit different bodies. So yeah, I'm thinking about all those things. I don't think I had any Houstonian in that poem in particular, but it certainly, I think it probably, growing up in Houston, did definitely make me very, very aware of Hank Williams, and so I think that's what triggered the poem. Hearing the song, and I think I heard, as a matter of fact, I heard John Fogerty sing Jambalaya. He sings it really well, and that might have been the thing that made me say, "Man, I want to be a Cajun. I want to do that." So there, and then the poem gets going.
Asa asks, how do you think writers, poets, and fiction writers should approach revision?
With determination and trying to have as much fun with it as you can, but realizing that some of it is kind of teeth grinding stuff. But writing, this is a standard creative writing phrase, but writing is rewriting, and nobody gets anything. Well, I won't say nobody ever, but by and large, every really excellent poem or novel or whatever is the product of all kinds of rewriting. And I think Yeats, in one of his poems, talked about, I can't quote the poem, but he talked about how he worked very, very hard on a poem in order to seem like he hadn't worked on it at all. And I try to do that with some of my stuff. I try to make my stuff seem casual, like it just came springing out, but it didn't. I'm here to tell you, the more casual and the more impromptu it sounds, probably the harder I worked on it to make it sound that way. So here's the thing that I definitely advise. Don't be discouraged if your first drafts look sloppy and look hopeless, because that's what they do a lot of times. I mean, I look at mine sometimes and I just think, I can't do anything with this. It's a mess. And what that tells me is that I need to switch my perspective and see what's good in this. What is it that made me want to start it in the first place? And just realize, I mentioned earlier that my goal when I'm doing rewrites is just to make the poem better than it was before. It doesn't have to be perfect, because that'll drive you crazy. But over time, over working on it for a while, just a little bit, working on it 10 minutes a day for a few days, making it a little better and a little better, all of a sudden it starts to look better. And then you feel, okay, maybe I can do something with this. But don't ever feel bad that your poems or prose or whatever comes out sloppy. And don't ever imagine that if you had more talent, it would come out more perfect, because it probably wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, to me at least, my mantra is make a mess and clean it up and see what I get.
This question has to do again with that last poem. What factors played along when you genderized the neurotransmitters?
I think the way the name sounded. I think I told you that serotonin sounds like a woman's name, Sarah Tonin, and then dopamine. That made me think of the old Walt Disney Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs thing, Dopey, and I thought, okay, Dopey is a boy, and I made him the cartoon Dopey kind of character with the buck teeth and the straw hat, and just a cartoon. These are all cartoons, really. I'm just kind of having fun with the way the names sound. And norepinephrine, I probably was a woman because Nora is a woman's name. I just put them together, and I know that for acetylcholine, I wanted that Nike figure, that athletic figure, because acetylcholine, it activates muscles and stuff. And I just thought, I just pictured and that happens to be female, but just because Nike is a female figure. Anyway, there was no real meaning to it other than what the name sounded like to me.
This last question is a quick one. Does anyone ever mistake you or think that you're related to Charles Webb, the author of The Graduate?
That is precisely why I write as Charles Harper Webb, because when I first moved to LA, Charles Webb was living there, the Graduate guy, and I had people come to my readings and actually say to me, "You're not him." And I said, "Well, the hell I'm not." I mean, that's sort of fighting words. But we would laugh about it. But I'd say, "Well, I may not be the him you're looking for. My mother thought I was him," and my sister, who is a librarian and has access to the Library of Congress cataloging, she said she spent way too much time going into the Library of Congress catalogs and correcting things, because I was always being placed in the wrong deal. So I thought about being Charles H. Webb, and Charles Webb is such a common name. It's a really common English name. My father was my grandfather was an English immigrant anyway. It's so common. So there was another Charles H. Webb who was a writer. He was a music critic, and so that messed it up. And my sister said, "Well, use your middle name. There's no Charles Harper Webbs. That'll work." And so it did. But yes, I definitely did get that, because Charles Webb, the other one, lived in Pasadena, which is part of Greater LA. And yeah, he was around. I'm surprised that you know that, whoever said that, because it used to be that graduate was a household word, but it isn't anymore. But yeah, yeah, and yeah.
Well, Charles, thank you so much for answering all those questions and for the
Oh,
fabulous reading.
happy to do it. This was a kick.
And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Charles. Mhm.